You're listening to Southern Miss Radio. It's time for News You Need. News You Need is a look at current events and how they affect the college community and beyond. And now here's the host of News You Need, Dr. Ed Simpson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is the show where we talk to the most amazing people in the whole world, which is our USM students. And we talk about what's in the news, what are the issues facing our university community and our towns, our states, and our nation, actually. And we do that by talking about what's in the news. So we have a great panel for you today. Why don't we just kind of go around, introduce ourselves, a little bit about maybe who you are, and our students, if you would, tell us perhaps your major, your hometown, just a little bit about what's going on. If you have a student group that you represent, that would be great too. So, of course, we have Lillian today. So those of you know Lillian.
Okay, I guess I'm going first.
Yep.
Given that most of those questions don't apply to me. So, yeah, this is Brent. I'm here again, here to chat about the current news and what's going on in our world.
And you are?
Oh, yeah, I'm an assistant professor here in the School of Media and Communication at USM.
Yeah, so now most people do not know. I'm going to ask, actually, Lillian, what is an assistant professor?
It's Dr. Hill. He just told me. So, yeah.
Do students wonder what that means if somebody says, I'm an assistant professor?
I mean, I've never really even heard, like, assistant professor. It's like either professor or professor. Like.
Yeah, and then so you don't assist professors.
No. I don't know why it's called that.
I don't know why it's called
I
that
assist you, I guess.
I don't know.
I don't know what I assist.
I think maybe it's like one of these 1,200-year-old kind of things where maybe young professors assisted older professors. And,
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, assistant's just a stand-in for rookie.
Right.
It's a rookie professor.
Right. Junior rookie. So there you go. Okay.
Well, I've been on the show once before. My name is Jeremiah Lyons. 19, USM student, major is video arts. Just kind of here to, make my mark on the school the best I can.
Excellent. Love that. We love folks making their mark. Lillian, quit looking at your watch.
I'm sorry. I'm Lillian. I'm a producer of News You Need, senior communication studies major.
Yes, and we're graduating in just a few weeks.
Yes.
And we're all very excited about that. Okay, so, fellas, tell me, what are our USM students talking about? What's big? What's going on? What's everybody chatting about? What are the issues?
Well, today is the National Panhellenic Council's new member presentation tonight at 7. So I think a lot of students are excited about that because we get new D9 brothers and sisters. So, yeah, that's pretty big.
And 7 o'clock where?
Reed Green Coliseum.
Tickets the big show, the big stage.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow.
And tickets are still on sale until I think 5.
Okay.
And then tickets at the door are $20, so I'd rather pay that $15.
$20.
Yeah.
Okay, is it worth it?
It's definitely worth
Totally
it.
worth it. Totally worth it. Okay, Jeremiah's nodding.
Yeah.
Have you been the one yet?
I have. I actually got to see my sister cross not too long ago. I think that might have been
2021?
2021, 22.
Yeah.
There you go.
And it was definitely a sight to see. Any chance I get to go to, one of those events, I'll always make sure that I'm there because it's an electric atmosphere. Like, it's a lot of love, it's a lot of passion, you're gonna see a lot of tears too. Not even gonna lie, it's a whole lot of tears. But you can tell that everybody has love for the organization.
Why are we crying?
Because a lot of students that are crossing are either a legacy or like they're just making their mark. Like me, none of my family members were D9 affiliated, so I was the first one in my family to do it. So it was kind of emotional because I crossed and did some things that no one in my family ever thought of. And for those
crossed means
like you joined that organization.
You joined.
Yeah,
okay,
not
not you're out of the organization.
No.
Gotcha. Okay.
What is it called with the white fraternities and sororities? Like they have Rush. It's a form of Rush, basically.
Really? So this is where you're formally accepted into that sorority / fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then like for the legacy members, like of course it's gonna be like emotional because like your mom or dad was the original, and then you're coming in and you're another part of them.
So it's happy tears.
Yes.
Happy tears. Okay.
That's awesome. It feels like it's really late in the semester.
It does feel
to
late in
do
the
this.
semester.
Well, it's always towards the end of the semester anyway, right before finals week, because I mean you got Thanksgiving break, Christmas break. The fall premiere is usually very busy, very fast, but the spring takes a little bit longer. I crossed in the spring, so
Okay. Oh, so you do it every semester?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Well, cool. What else are our students talking about? What's in the news?
I think everyone is still coming off of the election, just a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that one's going to end up making waves for a couple more weeks, months, years, just because of how much of, I guess you can say, how much has been put out on the media regarding the election and the electees and whatnot. And, you know, when something is thrown in your face that often, you have no choice but to, you don't necessarily have to put in your 2 cents about it, but you end up forming some opinions about it just because it's such a big topic. So.
Well, so obviously the country and we did talk about this last week. I'm sure we'll talk about it for actually the next approximately 4.2 years. Dr. Hale. So clearly the country took a hard right during the last election, I think, and that was a little bit of a surprise because once again the polls were incorrect. How do our students feel about the results of the election, the fact the country is clearly more on the conservative side than many of us thought, perhaps? How do our students feel about that?
You know, I think it's really based on perspective. I know from my personal standpoint, I've always looked at the election and just politics in general as something that's more so food for thought than something that should disrupt my, I guess you could say, mental space and what politics tend to do for a lot of our students, because we're still young, even though we have all this information and knowledge at our fingertips. It's kind of like a knowledge overload, if that makes sense. Like all of a sudden, 1 minute you're just scrolling, watching funny videos, and all of a sudden you have somebody in your face saying that basically for the next 4 years you're going to be going through something similar to hell. So it's just like you don't quite know how to feel about it. And then you have the other side of social media where it's like, no, you're not going to go through hell. This is actually going to be a very good thing because this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And it's just like you have both sides of the information. You have to do with it what you will. But me personally, I just kind of intake, process, and I just got to keep living my own personal life because, yeah, that's a big thing, but there's still big things going on within my personal life as well. So it's just all about balance and perspective.
Interesting. Good. Really, really good perspective.
I wonder if it's the case that you all, being students in a red state, like a clearly very red state, means that maybe it's not that interesting that there was a
or
shift
jarring,
to the right.
maybe.
Yeah, because you're already living in that. Like, this is just the space that we live. Maybe it would be very different if we were in, like Michigan or something. What just happened, right? But here, do you think maybe it's just kind of like, well, this is just life?
I think a lot of students have that perspective, and when I say I feel like a lot of people are coming down, I feel like they're really accepting it now. Like it's over with, we just have to deal with it for the next 4 years.
Okay, we're gonna take a break, and I'm sure we'll pick up with some election headlines on the other side.
Never completely ready to adopt a teen.
For late nights writing English papers.
For your teen's music taste.
For dinners where they talk more on their phone than with you.
For the first time, they call you mom.
You're never completely ready to adopt a teen, and you can't imagine the reward.
To learn more about adopting a teen, visit adoptuskids.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Okay, and we are back, and through the break, we actually were chatting about the benefits of being in a blue or a red state. It's kind of interesting, fascinating stuff going on. So you guys get your information primarily from TikTok?
Not primarily.
Not
but
primarily.
A lot of different stuff is brought to our attention through TikTok, and then we go and do our own research.
Okay.
Well, I do.
You
I don't know
say
about
that.
everybody.
Yeah, it's the most easily accessible because most of the majority of people that are our age end up scrolling through TikTok when they have free time, when they're not at work or doing homework or whatever the case may be.
So unless it shows up on TikTok, you really don't know about it.
Not really.
That-
No.
Dr.
It's
Hale,
interesting,
what
though,
does
'cause
that?
I wonder if that's an artifact of it being important enough to have also been put on TikTok,
Yeah.
right? So it kind of goes both
Ooh,
directions.
I'm not there.
You know, if it's news, it's big enough news, it's gonna end up on TikTok,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but what I had for breakfast ends up on TikTok.
Does it?
Well, not me.
I don't
What
know.
Lily
That-
had
have-
for
I mean,
breakfast
it's
ends
not-
What
up
did I
on
have for
TikTok.
breakfast though?
I don't know. I don't follow you on TikTok.
You don't have to follow me. The algorithm will push it out if you're around me long enough. So if I posted what I had for breakfast, you'll see it.
She's not lying. When did I follow you? I followed you not too long ago, and all of a sudden I just seen.
It just started
random-
rushing.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for weeks about the effects of social media, but I do challenge our students, and this has been a while since I went on my rant, but I do challenge our students. If you think you're getting any kind of actual view of the world, or even a view of the news, by only consuming TikTok, I'm just going to look you straight in the eye and say you're not. You're just not. The algorithms do not allow any sort of actual representation of the real world. They just don't, because they're there to sell you a product. So I do challenge our students, and here's what I do. And I'm going to ask Dr. Hale what he does, because I'm not sure we ever talked about it. Here's how I consume the news. I do not expect anybody to do what I do, but I spend about 45 minutes to an hour every day looking at the news. I will watch CNN. I will watch MSNBC. I will watch Fox. I will drop into CNBC, which is a business network, which you will when you get older, because you'll care
Oh, I
about the
already watch it,
markets
yeah.
and then I'll read the New York Times. I'll look at the Washington Post, and then there's a couple of higher education magazines that I look at, Inside Higher Ed, and then Chronicle. And so the idea is I want to know what's going on. It's just kind of what I've done for the last 50 years. I expect to do it probably the next 2 or 3 months anyway, because, I'm getting up there in the world. So I do challenge our students to, are you thinking about how you get the news? Dr. Hale, how do you get the news?
So I get a lot of mine through. So I'm going to the same places that you're largely going to, but I tend to get more of my news through podcasts.
Interesting.
So I listen to the podcast versions of the same things.
Oh, okay. So okay, that's fascinating.
That's
and
just-
when do you do this? Like in the shower, on the 4-minute drive to work? When do you do this?
I'd say most of it is while I'm at the gym.
Really?
Because I will listen to the news while I'm working.
Okay.
Maybe because it makes me angry and then I work out harder.
There could be.
But
Could be.
That is where I tend to consume a lot of that. And then, there's some seeking out stuff that isn't in podcast form too, but like that tends to be my go-to.
That is fast. So that is, I think, relatively in the last couple of years new, right? When did you start that?
Probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, you're an early adopter of the podcast movement. Do our students listen to podcasts?
Yes, a lot actually.
Can you remember one? I don't want to put you on the spot, but give me a podcast you listen to.
I mean, I don't personally listen to podcasts unless it's like devotional stuff. But like I said, when I'm looking at news or looking for news, unless it's like brought to my attention on TikTok and then I go read about it more, then that's the only time I like look at it. Or like if I'm watching 6 o'clock news with what's the news station down the road?
DAM?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about it.
Okay.
I say for me personally, I kind of take a different perspective on listening to podcasts, because as a young generation, well, I'm not, of course our generation is young, but as like our generation, I feel like we have this nice creative touch. Like we're real big into doing things for ourselves and making our mark in our own type of way. And I have a lot of friends, some people that aren't friends that I've just like somehow seen that have started podcasts. They have other social outlets such as YouTube and whatnot, but they basically have made a way for their voice to get out there. And I know that us as a community and just like the world in general everybody has a bias. Nobody is non-biased because of whether it be their environment that they were raised in or the people that they've come across. So they're always going to have their own perspective on, whether it be politics, religion, whatever the case may be. And me as a consumer, I try to see both sides because I know you can't really have any type of argument unless you have both sides of the story. So I look at the young generation's perspective rather than the oldest, just because although y'all have been through more and y'all are more wise by default, we also have to look at it from the perspective of those that are living through it in the same way that we are.
Yeah.
So I won't remember specific names of podcasts, but
Yeah.
if it's a young audience, if it's like young people that's there discussing it, I want to see their perspective. I want to see how they're
Interesting.
viewing it.
I think related to that, it's actually very interesting because recently there's been, so coming back to the election, there's been some pushback against kind of how Harris performed because she was very slow to appear on the types of podcasts that you're talking about, right? So Trump went on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan is something that young men do listen to, and so he's there, and we know from exit polls people like legitimately use that as part of how they decided to vote for him. And so, like, this is a media ecosystem that's really, really powerful now.
Yeah. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a school of media and communication to understand that and to challenge our students to, number one, broaden their focus, but also take part in that ecosystem, right? Make a difference. Try to collect audience and see what happens. So that's all fascinating stuff. So speaking of which, let me throw a couple of headlines at folks here, and let's see what our USM students are thinking. So are you watching Trump's cabinet picks? So in other words, the folks who are going to lead these various government agencies, are our students watching this?
Watching, no, but I guarantee probably half of USM population has probably seen it come across their phone at some point. But as far as watching closely and like seeing who's actually going to be in charge of this, that, and the third, I don't think many of us are watching.
It feels very distant, but I will tell you, it's super important to what happens to you in your communities. So here's one headline. I just want to get your thoughts on this. This is from the New York Times. Trump appoints Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be health secretary.
And we're all super excited.
Yay!
I figured that was going to happen, honestly. Like, once I had seen that he had endorsed Trump, I was like, well, 9 times out of 10, Trump was going to turn around and be like, well, we have use for you. We're going to use you.
Yeah. So what do we think of that, though? RFK Jr., what do we know about him?
Just the name.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It is interesting.
But
It is interesting, just the name. So he is a well-known anti-vaxxer. He has some very odd ideas on what is healthy. And he has some very odd ideas on the government's role in determining what is healthy. And what's freaking people out the most seems to be anti-vaccine and some things like he's a fan of raw milk, for instance. Those kinds of things. And being in charge of one of the largest bureaucracies in federal government, and of course that sets a lot of the policy for the nation's health care.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but I'm not too much of a fan of raw milk. But
I can't handle regular milk, so I'm definitely not drinking raw milk.
Yeah.
So no.
But looking at it from a different perspective, I can see why that would be something that ends up becoming a huge talking point when it comes to America's health, because everybody likes to live their life a certain way when it comes to their health, and when somebody is to come along and just be like, here, have some raw milk and this random vaccine that I just came up with, like, it's gonna cause a little bit of an uproar. But I know for me personally, and I always get fussed out by this by my mom and other people, but I take vaccines almost like when needed, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not huge on, like, take this, take that. I try to regulate my body, my body's health on its own, because I know that the way that it was made is made to be able to take care of itself the best that it can until it can't. So it's like people that take a bunch of antibodies when they don't need it. Like, if you keep pushing these antibodies into your system 24/7 and just taking those type of pills like over and over and over, eventually your body's going to become weak without them. So you might as well like keep your body for as strong as you can.
Huh. I'm going to push back a little bit on that. So you're okay with vaccines or not?
Yes.
You're okay with vaccines. Okay. Well, I'm a absolutely 100% get the darn vaccine kind of person. I think the fact we do not have a bunch of folks in wheelchairs anymore is because we have a polio vaccine. I think it's highly dangerous to appoint a health secretary that does not believe in vaccines. That's just me.
Well, and what's really, I think, important, right, is that we're talking about an organization that is supposed to actively engage in scientific research and in kind of getting together this body of knowledge about health and health practices, and to have someone now leading it who's actively counterproductive to that effort is really important, because there's so much evidence for why these vaccines are important. And there's so little, if not no evidence, that there's any connection between that and the negative types of side effects that Kennedy believes in. To have him in charge is just deeply unscientific.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the pushback on a lot of things. And so there's the other, that is in the line with some of his other cabinet appointments, right? So what do we feel about Elon Musk being in charge of government efficiency? Jeremiah, what do you think?
I love how I got quiet.
Yeah, Lillian, you're being very quiet.
It's one of those things that I don't quite know how to feel about it, just because, like I said, what the media pushes out, it's just like Elon Musk has done this, Elon Musk has done that. When it comes to government efficiency, it's just like, okay, he's been able to make big waves, and like we can talk about the SpaceX program, like he's made big waves for that as well. So it's just like I can see the benefits of him being in charge of that specifically, but it's also like just that thought in the back of your mind, like, okay, we've seen how he's performed outside of that position. What will he do once he gets there?
Yeah, and it's also interesting. One of the largest government contractors, anybody want to guess?
Are you talking about SpaceX?
SpaceX, owned by Elon Musk. So one guy who benefits from big government is now put in charge of being the efficiency expert for big government. Find that fascinating. It's just me.
I feel like in some ways this particular appointment isn't like the worst, right? There are some that are kind of sketchy, like Gates, for example. But this is one where it's like, okay, like I can kind of buy the argument. I don't know if he'll be great, but I can at least see kind of why we're considering this. This does make maybe some sense.
Well, this would be, in my lifetime, this would be about the sixth government efficiency effort. None of them has succeeded. So we are going to take a break, and we're going to pick up with efficiency on the other side.
My simple solution to the problem was remove people from the scene and help them feel safer.
In response to attacks against Asian Americans, Maddie Park raised over $250,000 to donate cab rides to the Asian community.
There is so much more work to be done. We really need to come together and tackle this issue as a community.
Support the Asian community. Learn how at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Put a frog in boiling water and it'll jump right out. But put a frog in cool water and slowly heat it up, that frog will boil. As veterans, we tell ourselves the lie that we can handle anything. We let the water boil. You are not a frog. If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach. Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
Okay, we are back. So let me change gears a little bit. I do think the cabinet, what's really going on in the headlines right now is a lot of these cabinet appointments. Getz for Attorney General, if I think that's right, who's also being investigated by the House Ethics Committee for a variety of very bizarre accusations. He resigned from the House, which ended that investigation immediately. And so now there's a lot of agitation about releasing the report. What are the findings on that report? So we could get in the weeds on that. But I do want to return a little bit to the overall shift to the right here. So what we're seeing, especially in Louisiana, Florida, and now Texas, is a lot of legislation and a lot of energy toward addressing higher education. So, for instance, in Texas, there's a story in the New York Times this week where a legislator basically forced the University of Texas at Austin to end its LGBTQ minor. As in, there was a minor, like, you know, a major and a minor. And so there was a minor that dealt with a series of courses that dealt with issues involving our LGBTQ community. This legislator got upset, and UT Austin just ended the minor, just killed it. So what do we think about that? What do our students think about this idea of, as we shift to the right as a nation, how does that affect higher ed, and does that, and that necessarily that affects our students?
I think eliminating a minor, especially in the realm of LGBTQ plus education, I think it's going to cause a lot of problems, not just within the LGBTQ community, but also with the school itself, because there are a lot of diverse people in this world, and there are a lot of students that went to school because they offered that minor and they wanted to learn more. They're just like students that want to learn more and be well informed. So just like eliminating it all the way instead of trying to find like a middle ground for it, I think that was kind of harsh. So I don't know how everything will work out with that, but yeah.
Not even looking from it from a, you know, leftist or right
Yeah.
perspective, just looking at it from an ethics standpoint of just like, it's just basic restriction. I mean, it's just, if you look at it as, let's see, like say they took away like the video arts program on campus, that shuts out a lot of opportunity for learning, for growth. It just shuts everything out that it basically just, it just takes all the, I guess you could say, fire out of some people. Like it just kills their motivation to go farther in whatever they want to study.
Well, the argument, and you can broaden this out to LGBTQ, DEI, Latin America. You can broaden this all out, but the basic argument this guy was making was that LGBTQ community is not a legitimate area of study, and it's meant to not educate but to indoctrinate. What do we think about that argument?
Well, it's basically the same as saying that there's no reason in studying civil rights or, you know, studying the presidents. I mean, whether people like it or not, LGBTQ is a part of our history. It's something that there was real struggles to be had within that community, and so on and so forth. So you can't just take one part of history and cut it out. If you want to know the history of your nation, you might as well know all of it, not some parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to do a slippery slope argument here, but like, there's already been attacks against like critical race theory. There's there's no reason why we can't follow this and say, well, there's no gender studies, there's no black studies, we can't have these things.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to let Dr. Hale have the last word. Yeah, and that may be a really good topic for next week. So this has been a production of Southern Miss Student Media. Our producer is Lillian Scott. Thank you, Lillian. Our videographer is Blake Lawrence. Thank you, Blake. And our engineer is Triderica Winters. And we will be back. Will we be back next week? We will be back next week, but not the week after.
This has been News You Need with Dr. Ed Simpson. News You Need airs Friday afternoon